Excellent. See, this is why, first and foremost, I have to do a sound check. Make sure that I'm going through loud and clear, that you guys can hear me. Right, so I'm just going to give a few seconds for people to tune in, get a sound clearance. Okay, I can see Ayub al-Maliki, ahlan wa sahlan. Shama, ahlan wa sahlan. Jahadar, you're doing it. Sound is working loud and clear. Crystal. All right. So, inna alhamdulillah wa kafah. والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فالسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا Juan Leute, bienvenidos a todos. Bakhair Raghale, Khushamade, Tasriakal, Kemcho, and as always, people, Swagatam. So, much love to all of you, right? It's always a pleasure. Seriously, it brings a smile to my face to converse with you people. Adnan, ahlan wa sahlan. Claire, as always, marhaban, Adam. All right, so what I want to take a look at today, amongst other things, is, if I can bring this up, there it is. So this is some of the things we're going to take a look at in today's lesson, inshaAllah. Keeping a personal part of the personal connect with the Quran, I thought let's choose a surah just to give an example of a very short surah that we all know all too well, Surah Layth, and let's speak a bit about that. Then I wanted to touch up on this topic of hubris. Okay, dealing with the ego, and I want to take a look at a case study from the Quran perspective, but a historical Islamic example which is incredibly important. And I want to take this, let's take Walid ibn Mughirah. Why people feel he is the subject of many Quranic ayat. Okay, an arch nemesis to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yet why? And how did he end up becoming adopting such a role? He is the father of Khalid bin Walid, radiallahu an. And I thought it's quite interesting because many people may not be completely aware of the backstory that goes into this character, Walid ibn Mughirah. And then also, I thought, look, let's give you guys a little introduction to a story, just a brief dialogue that is in words, but really goes beyond words. And that is between two legends, Allah, Ibn Rushd and Ibn Arabi. Muhammed or Kabrit al-Ahmar, red sulfur. Allah, known to many as Sheikh al-Akbar. And on the other hand, so you've got this transcendental, divine, experiential navigator, Muhammed ibn Arabi, one who explores realms that are ineffable, beyond words. So, conversing with the man of reason himself, Allah, Abul Walid ibn Rushd, the great philosopher, the man who introduced Aristotle once again to Europe in the Dark Ages, Averroes, the man who really kindles once again the flame and passion for philosophical reasoning within the Islamic tradition following the tumultuous turn of Imam Ghazali almost a century earlier. So when these two giants meet and they have a somewhat of a dialogue, and albeit a brief one, but it's so, I thought, let me share that with you guys. So that's something I want to take a look at. Whilst I'm doing this, I'm just taking a look at your comments. Lanzetta, you're doing it. Right. Isn't he the one who's very articulated and cunning in diplomatics and politics? I'm not sure. I'm not sure who you mean by that. Ibn Rushd? I'm not sure. But so people, you know the drill. Click like, click share, spread the love, man. Spread the love, people. Let me just see. Yep. Whilst you're doing that, I'll take a sip. All right. So, first and foremost, let me just take a look, connect with mi gente over here. What are you guys saying, man? ¿Cómo están, mi gente? What's going on? Is diplomacy allowed in Islam? Of course. In fact, it's transmitted by many of the great Salaf that it is a huge portion of knowledge in this life, and that is diplomacy. So and often people, and it has sometimes, people may use different words to refer to it. One word used in the time of the Salaf, and I believe it's transmitted from Sayyidina Ali radiallahu an as well, that he said mudaratun nas. And this mudarat is it's interesting because the word can have it can have a negative connotation. It can. I suppose it's a bit like the word cunning. I mean, mudarat doesn't mean, but mudarat, the way the word cunning has almost at times a negative connotation to it. So mudarat does, and it's how you are doing that, but with the other, with people, having to kind of be diplomatic with them. And it's it really is it's something, it's a science in and of itself. Fahad, you're doing it. Much love to you, all the way to Australia, down under, people, down under. So what else have we got? Who have we got here? King Farabri himself, salam. Look at that. Not even salam, salam. All right. Icy Saracen, you're doing it. Right. We've got Hussein Bourbon from Long Island, New York. All right. We missed Abdul Basit saying Balasani, Mufti Saab. I did check into the Bengali greeting, and it turns out it's actually just Swagatam anyway. So I thought, well, I've covered that as it is then. Right, who else have I got here? All right, Ibn Firnas, you're doing it. Much love and salam. All right, Mudathir, you're doing it, yaar. See, here is a hidden gem, people. Mudathir, who has reclused and turned away from the public eye to live a private and more secluded life, but still has many gems to share with the public. This is why I'm asking him if you jump onto Mind Trap whenever you're ready. All right. Speaking of Mind Trap, we should have this, inshallah. We should have an episode this Friday coming up. We've got Bilal Ahmed Salam from Jamaica. Wow, much love. Doing it. Mwah, Gio. Right, so look at this, the different regions. It's just so good to see people from Nora Parish. Salam from Florida. Wa alaikum assalam, Nora. It's always a pleasure to see you online. Right, I see Saracen firing away with the super chat straight away into the super chat. Shukran and much love for the super chat. Let's read his question, people. Why don't Muslims compile their own Bible by adding the Hadith collections after the pages of the Quran? Since some Muslims have given Sahih Bukhari divine status, won't this make sense? Why don't Muslims compile their own Bible by adding the Hadith collections after the pages? I'm not sure I understand that question, IC Saracen. So, lo siento, hermano. I think what you're asking, Kiraga, you're doing it, much love from Sweden. We've got quite an international audience online tonight. Dervish, as always. All right, ¿qué tal, mano? We've got Dervish from Arizona, presente, que lo que. So, and last but not least, Claire right here from the Midlands, representing. All right, from Coventry, people, Coventry. That's where it's all happening, even though it got done over in the World War. Those of you that remember, you see, this is what politics is. The South, they thought, it's only Coventry, let it get bombed. Toba. So, and right, so Sharaf, you're doing it from India. All right. Mera Bharat Mahan, you're doing it. Right, so I see Saracen adding to the question. Sorry if the question is confusing. Sure. From what I understood by the question is that why don't Muslims formally have an adage to portions of the Quran from a Hadith literature? I don't think that would make any sense, to be honest, in any way. Right, I don't think that would make sense in any way, because it's not at all what Muslims believe. They don't. The Hadith can never be on the same darja as the Quran. Never. That's not a conversation that's going to ever happen, because it just cannot be. And there's many reasons that the Hadith is not revelation. It's not divine content. It is historical records. That's what they are. So people describing records of the Prophet's actions, his presence, his statements, his description. These are simply historical data. That's what it is. Then there is an issue of etymology. Oh, sorry. Etymology. There is an epistemology. There's an issue of epistemology, that how do we know this data to be authentic? How do we know it to be? So there's a distinction in how, if we say that the Prophet said this, how do we know that to be true? So, well, what Muslims have done, and they've spent a considerable amount of effort in trying to do this, is they have a detailed study of asanid, and an isnad is a chain of narration. So they have gone into huge biographies of narrators, and they have exhausted their best effort in trying to filter authentic from fabricated narrations. And it's a highly commendable effort. But like all human efforts, it will never be infallible. So it's not, and that's the epistemology. That's like, how do we even know it to be true? Then you have the hadith, which is an isolated narration. It's coming from one on one, which adds questions to, I mean, it doesn't add questions to the narration. What it does is it means that this could be critiqued, because it could be a matter of perspective. So, for example, one person sees the Prophet doing something, fine, that could be his or her interpretation, because on many occasions the companions disagreed with themselves. So you have conflicting narrations. So you've got that element. Then you've got other challenges, the fact that hadith mainly are riwaya bil ma'na. That means they are transmission by paraphrasing. So this adds, as you can imagine, it adds challenges to the discourse, because what that means is, well, I could be conveying my interpretative analysis or my perception, and maybe I've understood it differently. So yeah, so these are all of these equations to understand why the discussion of hadith, as important as hadith is, clearly an important historical record and source within Sunni Islam. That goes without say. That said, it is never on the darja of the Quran, especially and the scholars disagree amongst themselves. They all agree that it's not on the darja of the Quran, but then they disagree in their attitudes towards it. So Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa, they very early on distinguished between hadith wa sunnah. So they said hadith is simply a historical record, a document. It's a data, it's just a document, let's say. Now, sunnah is the practice. So Imam Malik was very clear, and Imam Abu Hanifa too as well, that every hadith is not a sunnah, and not every sunnah was necessarily documented, although most may be. So it's like a Venn diagram, and you've got that. So a clear example from the Hanafi school where they argue this is the Hanafis will state that, right, the Hanafis will state that Taraweeh was a sunnah to pray it as 20, although, and in Jama'ah, although and this is why Umar radiallahu an did it so. So that's the Hanafi argument. Even if the hadith isn't there, the document isn't there, but we know it was the practice. Otherwise, so this was the argument presented by Imam Abu Hanifa. Otherwise, Umar radiallahu an lam yakun mubtadi'an. He was not somebody to innovate. So that's an example where they are saying that we know this to be the sunnah, but it's not a hadith. And the hadith that we do have, we know not to be the sunnah. So let me give you an example from the Maliki side. The Maliki side, there's many, because Imam Malik had the school of Medina as a practice, and he showed that. So in, let's say, praying with the hands at the side, we call this in the Maliki madhab sadl, right? So you drop the hands at the side. Now, this was the practice of many schools, early schools of Islam within Sunni Islam. So it was the practice of people like Sa'id ibn Musayyib, great tabi'i, the son-in-law of Abu Hurairah. It was the practice of Sa'id ibn Jubayr, the student of Ibn Abbas. It was transmitted from Sayyidina Ali radiallahu an. Although it's been challenged, the narration, but let's say the practice. Okay, let's stick to the practices. So you've got Sa'id ibn Musayyib, Sa'id ibn Jubayr, you've got Urwat ibn Zubayr, the nephew of Aisha. You've got Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, it's been transmitted from him. Hasan al-Basri. You've got in addition to that, Layth ibn Sa'ad in Egypt prayed the same way with Sadl, hands at the side. The Don of Medina, Imam Malik, prayed with his hands at the side. It's also a transmission in the school of Imam Ahmad. Now, that many people pray with their hands at the side in early Islam. It also happens to be the practice of the Shia in Ja'fari fiqh. Going right back, they claim, to Ahlul Bayt, to the Al, the family of the Prophet. It also happens to be the practice of many from a splinter group in early Islam, the Khawarij, who kind of deviate away in very early Islam, but when they prayed, they still prayed with their hands at the side. So when you've got three entirely separate sects in Islam, the Khawarij, who want nothing to do with the other two, Sunni Islam, the main branch, Shia Islam, all of these are entirely separate kind of branches of Islam, yet they all pray with the hands at the side. In Sunni Islam, it was a minority. In early Islam, there were many people, but then it seems to get crushed, because this is in the time of the Tabi'een, the students of the Sahaba, in the time of Bani Umayyah. And there's some theories. I've heard certain scholars present certain theories. I know it's also, I've heard Sheikh Hamza Yusuf say as well, who's also Maliki, that this most likely was this practice of Sadl, praying with your arms at the side, was suppressed by the regime, Bani Umayyah, because it was the practice of the Shia, the Alun Nabi, so the family of the Prophet, and thereby they didn't want any any kind of commonalities, and thereby they suppressed this practice. I'm not sure how strong that is as an argument, but that's also an argument people have made, because the evidence clearly shows it to be very common in the time of Bani Umayyah. And as following Bani Umayyah, it seems to have become reduced within Sunni Islam. And today it's only alive in the Maliki school, in the school of Medina. And it's a shame that some Malikis nowadays, you see, it doesn't matter how you pray, whether you pray with your hands at the side or you fold them or whatever you do. But it's a shame that you guilt trip people out of things. Because really, as astonishing as this may seem, there isn't a single Sahih Hadith to prove where to place the hands in prayer. There isn't a single Sahih Hadith. The closest Sahih Hadith that they have within Sahih Bukhari has huge problems, because it doesn't mention that the Prophet told them to do it. It mentions Umirna, and then Ismail says, I think he's talking about the Prophet, and some people say maybe he's not talking. And if he hadn't said that, it would have been okay. But the fact he said that showed people were speculating because he says we were commanded to place our hands above our hands, Umirna, and it triggered an amount of discussion. Who commanded you? So now the hadith doesn't say it. So people say, well, it must have been the Prophet. But when the narrator in the chain says, I think, he says, La ura illa in yunma dhalik ila nabi. He says, it appears to me that that's going back to the Prophet. Now that shows that there's doubt, because if I have to say that, it creates a discourse. So there's a great Mauritanian scholar, who, the father of Muhammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti, al-Mayabi. Sounds a bit strange for the Desis, Mayabi. Sheikh al-Mayabi, and he has an amazing book, I do have it somewhere, where he brings all the riwayat of holding the hands in prayer and shows every single one is weak or mu'allal, has a problem, and which is another fascinating discussion. because it goes to show that the purpose of prayer could never have been where you place your hands, because otherwise this would have been such an emphasized point, but yet the Prophet ﷺ didn't emphasize it. And that's why one of the transmissions in the Maliki school by Abdul Malik ibn Habib is, if you do fold your arms, فَكَيْفَ مَتَّفَقْ, however they come together. There is no set manner in how to do it. And this is why Ibn Abdul Barr, the great legend of the school of Medina and the master of, a huge Hafidh of Hadith, in fact, the largest scholar of Hadith in his day and age in the Western world. By Western world, we mean West, from Central to West Africa and Spain and Portugal, was Ibn Abdul Barr. And in his book Al-Kafi, he states that, he says, Man sadal, he says that you can do sadal or qabd. He says, sadal wal qabd kilahuma sunnah, that both are sunnah. And it's interesting, sadal, there is no hadith, or there are, but some weak hadith. So here you have in the school of Medina a clear sunnah, but it doesn't have a hadith. And the hadith is not deemed to be the sunnah. So this is a fascinating discussion. It's always interesting, and it's intriguing how many people are unaware of these discussions because maybe they haven't read them or they haven't studied them, but these are not hidden discussions. They are very well known in the books of Usul al-Fiqh. Right, so Samuel Nair, I love your person. I love you too, yeah. Shukran. Samuel Nair, that's a unique name, I must say. So shukran for that. There's an Urdu poet, he says, Kuch to baat hai teri baaton mein. He says, Kuch to baat hai teri baaton mein ke baat yahan tak aa pahunchi. That he says there is something. You see, when you translate it, it doesn't have the same effect, because he's basically saying there is something about what you say, otherwise this word wouldn't have reached this far. But because in Urdu the word baat is used for all those things, it has an extra suave feature to it. Suavemente. All right. So Samuel said, I've been watching your videos for quite a while and I'm really enjoying it. Your way of thinking's different, so modern and different from other muftis. The way you carry your personality is just amazing. Well, shukran and much love to you. It takes one to know one, and as it has been said, that the souls are intertwined, people. The souls are connected. Al-arwah junudun mujannata. So let's somebody said Javed Ghamdi's recent controversy. I'm unaware of Javed Ghamdi's recent controversy. Do tell me, what is the issue? I'd like to know. And see, just as we're about to begin, the most important things, Jamil Talking says, Mufti, is fart can invalidate the wudu? Is it, man? Tell me, man. Yes, unfortunately it is, man. It is what it is. I would say that on these things, please do not become OCD. Wudu was never meant to be an OCD discussion. It was meant to be something calm. The way I see it, when I do wudu, like the hadith mentions that when the person washes let's say their arms or their hands, that kharajat khatayahu, and a khatiyah can be something like a sin or something that misses you. People translate it in many ways. It doesn't actually mean sin, but I mean it's taken on that meaning of them, but also errors or just things which really ought to miss you, but you have them. And I this is how when I'm doing wudu, I will see it as negativity. You see, you wash away negativity, leaves you, and you're in a more positive state. That's how I would see it. And don't become OCD over these things. Don't become like, oh my God, did I break my wudu? Oh my God, did I? Because this is a tamma, as they say in Arabic. It's a calamity, because people get obsessed and it becomes like an addiction, a negative addiction. It's the opposite. I mean, it's linked to addictions. OCD, they have to dispel it, and oh my God, I missed a bit, and it becomes a nightmare. So do not, whatever my nasiha to you is, if you suffer from OCD, ignore. You are commanded and instructed by Islamic teachings to ignore it. If you think you've missed a bit, it doesn't matter. Allah is not going to, it's not going to hurt the deen. It's not going to hurt you, this bit that you think you've missed. You are somebody that is mandated to ignore all waswasa, these kind of whispering, these OCD insinuations. And if you can't, let's say you can't, I would say switch to tayammum. Do tayammum until your waswasa gets better, until you can cure. Tayammum is just with a stone. You just wipe over like that and done. But I would definitely avoid it like the plague. That's what I would say. Because once waswasa gets in, this waswasa is the Arabic word for OCD. It takes root, and then it becomes so difficult to eradicate, and it can start to trigger elements of psychosis if just left untreated for so long. Right. Okay. Bismillah. Let's take a quick lesson from the Quran. And I like to do this because I want to show us how the Quran is something that we can make a part of our daily lives if we can. Okay, I'm not saying I get the fact, not everybody can every day, but if we want to, we can. And it carries meanings which add value to our everyday lives. So I thought, look, here's a surah, Surah Ilaf, or Surah Quraish, whatever you want to call it. Very popular surah, the 9th surah from the end. And it's something that most Muslims have memorized. Okay, لإلاف قريش إلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. It's a very short surah with just 4 verses. Most people know it. Now, it's titled Surah Quraish, and we know what it's speaking about. It's speaking about Ilaf. Ilaf is the comfort, the kind of the comfortable familiarity from alifa to kind of get to harmonize with something, where you get the word ulfa, which also is like a harmonious harmony or love. Li'ilafi Quraish, that Allah is saying, is bringing our attention to the comfort of Quraish. And you think, إِلَافِهِمْ رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ, that the journeys that they set out on during the summer caravan and the winter caravan. Allah says that let them turn to worship whilst at this house, and here it means at the haram. Worship who? Allah. الَّذِي آمَنَهُمْ مِنْ خَوْفٍ, who has safeguarded them from fear. And Allah has also kept them nourished. أَطْعَمَهُمْ, fed them. Now, this is speaking primarily about Quraysh and their travels. But you see, the thing about the Quran is it will give you a meaning to your life with what you bring to it as you read it. That by extension, what about you? What about us? Look at all the comforts. I mean, just think about it for a while. You see, here were a people in a valley that were deserted, but yet they could go hundreds of miles in a caravan when when these kind of ways that they had were so unstable, and security was just a hit and miss phenomenon. Yet Allah kept them safe. Think about you when you are going to work every day. Many people, they may commute. I know because of the lockdown, people have been working from home, which in and of itself is an even greater ni'mah. Think about it. You get out of bed, you sit down, you start working. People who are commuting, they in traffic and doing, and think about it. We switch into autopilot. So people, and that's just the way the brain works. We switch into autopilot and we're driving. We're not even thinking. We're thinking about something else. Yet the unconscious mind is driving and Allah is keeping you safe. Most times, la samahallah, maybe there's an unfortunate exception. Most times you arrive safe and sound. You can't even remember the journey. We're like, oh, okay, am I there already? And the same thing when you're back, indulging in this decorum of safety and of these amenities that we have, going on the road, parking, whether it's vehicles, whether it's property, whether it's assets. Think about it. Stability. And especially where many of us are watching this, law and order. Now, crimes do happen, but there is still a substantial amount of law and order. People are not just looting in the streets. People, you see, there are countless disasters that we're not considering because they don't happen. And it's a mindset. That's all it is. You bring it back in, bring it home. Allah says, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. That was those people, Quraish, they returned to the Kaaba. Let them worship there. You return home, just some gratitude. Shukran lillah, alhamdulillah, a little charity to help someone, a little salah, a person, it's a few minutes. But a gratitude, these things change your life. Absolutely. Let me tell you something in psychology. In psychological studies, there's been studies where people competing in sports between silver medalists and bronze medalists. And now, if I was to ask you, who do you think at the end of that would be much happier? Who do you think? If, let's say we did this, we competed and you took away silver and such took away bronze. The intuitive response is the person who takes away silver. But studies have shown that no. People who take away silver often end up being less happy than people who take bronze. And you think, well, that doesn't make any sense. But what does the hadith say? You see, and this is, people have questioned, but it's transmitted as a hadith that, you see, look at those that if you are for gratitude, that look at those who are less fortunate. Because it's perspective, not at those who are more. Now you pause that hadith and you come back to this silver and bronze. You see, the silver medalist, because he or she is so close to the gold, they feel, damn, like I missed out, like I came second. Nobody remembers the second, they only remember the first. Who was the second man on the moon? It's only Neil Armstrong, we all know. So you see, to them, there's this, damn, I came so close. Yeah, yeah. Oh. But the bronze, you see, who are they closer to? Yes, you could say to the silver, but they're closer to the person who came forth. And they think, yeah, alhamdulillah, I made it in. I could have been out there. You see, it's perspective. We are social creatures. We judge by our circumstances and surroundings. So keeping that in mind, I thought I'd share that. And it's always good to just remember at times that all the things that we do take for granted, and this is me and everyone, and just, if anything, yeah, a little something to give back, give forward. Right, so let's come to your Amna Ali. You can also go live when Mufti shares a link. I will share a link later on. Let me just check some of these. Right, right. I'm not sure what some of these. I've missed some of these comments whilst I was speaking. Dear Mufti, I'm really interested to read Quran being a Christian. So could you please give me one Quran signed by you so that I can read and treasure it with me? I will keep it clean and respect it. Samuel, may Allah, God bless you. You reach out to me, I will have a Quran sent to you. I don't have the audacity to sign the Quran. Honestly, I've always, people who know me from when I first set off to study in the mid-late 90s as just a teenager, I'd always had this view of the Quran that I can never, I can't write on it. I can't mark it with things. I can't do that. People used to color in it. People would, make all kind of marks, especially when I did hifth as well. I memorized the Quran. And so during memorization, people would leave marks. They would do things, kind of scribble. They would, because it becomes an everyday book you're working with. But I couldn't. And before I even began, I remember going through there's the guidelines of Qurtubi, because I went to Damascus first and studied there for about a year and a half, and then went to memorize the Quran in Pakistan. So first I was in Syria. Now, I had read Imam Qurtubi, who's a great Maliki legend. In the introduction to his tafsir, he has this section on the kind of the propriety issues, the kind of how the adab and etiquettes of treating the Quran as a Muslim. And he had listed many of these things. Don't ever use it as a pillow. Don't put books on top of it. Don't do things like that. And right throughout my madrasa years, I was always even till today, I'm very vigilant of, I see sometimes people put the Quran and they put things on top of it. I just go and just gently, I'll just put it on top. So I've always had that. So I cannot, I would implode as a being if I thought I had the audacity to sign the Book of Allah. But I will buy one for you and have it sent to you. You message me, inshallah. I'll Instagram me. So I'm quite quick on Instagram. Let's see, what are the questions? Mufti, what do you think of Dr. Abdullah Galadari's work? His he is researching the intertextual links between Quran and Bible. Thought you might like it. I've not come across his works, but that sounds incredibly interesting. Do please share that with me if you can. I'm very interested. Definitely. That seems something very, because, you know, often we don't realize that the we assume a vacuum in which Islam came, and it didn't. It came in a context. Nothing exists in a vacuum. And it's only when we start to appreciate the historicity of what was going on in Arabia. And this is the beautiful thing about Islam. Let me tell you something. You see, it caters for people in all levels. And you, whatever level you are approaching it with, it is there for you. You could be someone that says, look, I want to, I just want to pray, and that's all I want to do, and I just want to do rituals. Great. It's there for you on that level. Somebody says, look, I want to learn a bit about it, but I'm not interested in this kind of deep academic approach towards things. For me, it's more, I just want to get on with my life. I want to live, but I'll learn certain things about Islam. I want to be a better human being, which we should all be trying to do. And that's wonderful. And the Quran and Islam is there for that. And then some people would be, well, actually, I want to learn. And some people will be that at a level where I want a deeper, much more encompassing context to everything that's going on. And it will provide you these wonderful gems. And things will start to fall in place. And you'll think, wow, now it makes sense to me. And you see, and there may be people, like I said, who that's not for them, and that's fine as well. If a person doesn't want to do that, they don't need to. Islam is not here to academize everyone, turn everybody into these kind of academics. It's not about that. It's about being a good human being. But it has this wondrous aspect to it if you want to. Let me give you an example. That, look, people often speak about the Sharia rulings of, let's say, which were the Judeo-Christian, or especially the Mosaic law of a nafs bin nafs, that a soul for a soul, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Now, this ruling, now I have got separate videos on what I call trajectory hermeneutics, which within the Maliki school is, and the Hanafis had this a bit, and the Hanbali school had it as well, but they were kind of conflicted. The Maliki school were really the developers of this, and they expanded on it the most. So they had a concept called Masalih Mursala, which in Usul Fiqh, which was where the Sharia mandates that you provide rulings that reflect the day and age. So, for example, and they have a lot of this. So 700 years ago, the great Maliki legend Al-Burzuli, which almost sounds like Brazilian, Burzuli, Abul Qasim Al-Burzuli, who was from Northwest Africa, and the great sheikh of his time, he had given the fatwa with a group of other scholars like Hajju and many other scholars that were there, that the hudud, the punishments, had changed because his day and age had changed. So this is well before modernity. It's going about 700 years ago. And he said that the hudud had changed in his day and age to reflect financial penalties because they seemed to be the more apt thing for his age. And then for centuries, there's a discussion and people practice it. And the same thing happened in the East with the Ottomans, Suleiman al-Qanuni, Solomon the Magnificent. He's called Qanuni because he said that the Sharia, the hudud, that the Sharia wants us to substitute them to other penalties like imprisonment and fines and stuff like that. And I've got videos on that. You can watch that. It's called Explaining This and Reading from the Books When They Say It. It's called Trajectory Hermeneutics and Can the Hudud Change Over Time? But let's go back to these hudud, which in the Quran it mentions that we had written in it, in the Torah, that anna nafsa bin nafs, that a life for a life, an eye for an eye, aynu bil aynu, wal udhnu bil udhn. That this, you see, this verse, which is reflecting the Mosaic law, people may say, you see, we're reading it today, and you're thinking, people think, look, Islam, Islam's being barbaric. But they're not understanding it with its context. It didn't come in a vacuum. You have to go back to the time of the Prophet and then before. So look at you and I. We are in a day and age, let's say 2021 now. Many things in our world today are a consequence of what? Of the world wars. You and I weren't there present in the world wars, but many things worldwide, including the United Nations and all of these kind of human rights declarations and all of these things that have become cemented as the daily mantra of our lives, are a consequence of the world wars. But imagine 1,000 years from today or 600 years from today, all that history got wiped out. And somebody was just looking at your notes and my notes, but they've chosen to not read about the world wars, and they wouldn't then understand how did things happen. Like, so, okay, there was a shortage of even sociological things. There was a shortage of, let's say, people. Sorry, I'm just seeing. Right, sorry, I was just seeing this link. It just mentioned about Facebook struggling with some. Okay, so that should be back. Now, let's say shortage of factory workers in Britain. So they bring people over from the Commonwealth, which is how, let's say, my parents and many other people's parents migrated. Now, a person who doesn't have that history may wonder, I wonder how these people go. Maybe these were the indigenous people. Let's say they don't read any other history. They only have my notes. And they think, well, so this is how, and let's say I speak of things like, all right, we're going to start the academic studies in September. So people think, okay, he came up with it, but actually there's an entire system of holidays and things which date back to harvesting and stuff like this. So let's go to the time of the Prophet. You had something known as Ayyam al-Arab, which just translates as the days of the Arabs, but it actually meant to the great wars that the Arabs undertook. And this huge, and these date back to something like 100 to 100 plus years before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so when the Prophet is growing up and the people around him, they are growing up with the backdrop of all of these stories in the background. Not stories, events which are being transmitted as stories. So let me give you an example. There is the great war known as Harb Al Basoos. Now, this is a drama in and of itself. Right, let's, if you want drama. You see, there's so much to say about this, but okay, let me give you a quick snapshot first, and I might give some details. A snapshot, this was a war that lasted for 40 years. Is from the Ayyam al-Arab, 40 years, right? And it's named Harb Al Basoos. And Basoos, you think, well, what is Basoos? Basoos is the name of a lady And no, it's not a romantic kind of like Troy. It's not that kind of war. For some reason, right? So it's not one of those. What it is, it's actually over a camel. There you go. You wanted romance. So, and it's amazing that the events that transpire in this story, because it just begins with, it's not actually over a camel, it's over this kind of rivalry and this ego. And there's this king by the name of Kulayb, and this is actually in the Arabian Peninsula, and he's from Arabi'a, and which is from Wa'il, this tribe. Yeah. So the point is, he's from this tribe. He becomes the king, but he is quite ruthless, and he does all these kind of wars, and people don't like him. But some do. And he has this brother that they call Zir Salim, and this is another thing, how he's known as Muhalhil, and he's the first person to write lengthy odes, these kind of Arabic qasidas, qasaid, these long poems. First person to do it was him. He's known as Zir Salim. They call him Zir because it comes from Zir Nisa, because he's just love women. And the term, those of you that have heard it, Zir Nisa. And he was just an absolute playboy, and just spent his time in booze and women. That's it. Always drunk, always with women. And that was just his thing. And he was very talented, as in he had a lot of talent. He was very brave. In fact, there's stories of his brother trying to have him killed off, Kulayb, because he thinks he has been hitting on his wife, whose name is Jalila. And he hadn't. I mean, whether he had or not, I don't know. But so he tries to come up with all these things that, I need this, we need the milk of a lioness to cure this, and we need this. And there's all these kind of epics where he goes out and he actually gets it done, and he's meant to get killed, but he keeps coming back. This huge, but yet once he comes back and does his duty, he'll just be drunk with alcohol and just surrounded by women. And as far as the good life goes. And so what happens is Kulayb, he asks his wife, this Jalila, who's meant to be one of the most beautiful women in the time, who has some issues with him. He asks her once that who's the top don of the Arabs? He's like, don't say my name straight away. I'll let you take a breath or two before you say it. So she comes out with her brother's name, Jassas. So that's his brother-in-law now. So naturally, it hurt the ego, man, this one. So he just let it be. He let it slide. I let this one slide, man. So then what happens is, after some while, Jalila is trying, she's saying this provocatively, by the way, because she and her brother Jassas, they don't like him. They don't like this guy, Kulayb, and he's the king, but they don't like him. And whilst they have this kind of bickering and gossiping and, backbiting kind of sessions going on, the aunt comes to stay with her brother, and the aunt's name is Basoos. So this is Basoos. She turns up, and, like a good old aunt, she comes to add all the masala that was missing. She goes, that Kulayb needs to be, blah, blah, blah. You need to push this button, push that button. So what happens is, a while later, Jalila ends up having a conversation, and she provokes Kulayb again. She says, yeah, but my Jassas, my brother, he's just like on another level. So he's had enough. So what he does is, when he leaves the home, he sees that Basoos, the aunt, the aunt that's visiting, she's there, and she's brought with her a camel, and the camel's got a fasil in Arabic, we call it a baby camel. I'm not sure what the technical term is. So it's got this infant camel with it, and the infant camel is just kind of going around on the fields. So what he does is, he takes out his arrow and he just shoots it. And he says, well, he thinks, He thinks, what are you going to do about it? So he leaves it. He goes, obviously, people are triggered, but they choose to ignore. And he is quite ruthless, Kulayb. So what happens is he comes back to them and provokes them. He says, hey, so what's happening with the, he says, what's with the dead camel? So they know that he's trying to provoke them. So, and they're very witty. So they say, well, oh yeah, we're grateful. Now check this for perspective. They say we're actually grateful because you've actually spared up the milk of the mother for us. So, hey, more milk for us. Perspective, huh? Perspective. So he thinks, what? Acha. Humka wo samjhenga. So he says, acha, so more milk for you. So what he does is her camel, Basoos's camel, he shoots it where the udder is, and it kind of goes the arrow, the spear, whatever it is, it goes through and it damages the udder. So it's useless. It's either going to die, or even if it doesn't, it can't give milk. So at this stage, their tribe, these people, they're all ultimately related, but here they're known as the Bakriyin. They don't know what to do, so they're trying to keep a cool mind. Jassas is saying, look, let it be, forget it, we don't want to fight him, we don't want to do this, we don't want to do that. And the Basoos is like, nah, she's really adding the masala. She's saying, oh my God, what kind of a useless nephew are you? If only there were real men here. Ha ha ha, if only. And so she starts saying all this poetry. Back then, the aunts, when they would kind of whine and moan, they would do it in poetry. So she just say like a 50-line poem, wrap her way through it. So eventually there's some other altercations happen, and Jassas kills Kulayb. He kills the king. And it's amazing, in this story you had Zir Salim, who is just an utter playboy. He's like somebody he's very talented, but he's just withering away in luxuries of life and just indulgent, extremely indulgent. And this hits him so much that people say that if only there was somebody that would avenge the death of Kulayb. And Kulayb, before he dies, he apparently kind of writes on some rock that do not kind of compromise with them. And so Zir Salim turns into this ruthless warrior. I mean, he was already a warrior. I mentioned the stories that they used to send him to do all this. And he wages this relentless campaign of bloodshed. I mean, he's from the Taghlibiyin, the tribe, against the Bakriyin. Relentless. And this goes on no matter how many people try to intervene. There's a very famous Arab known as Al-Harith ibn Ubad, who's also related to the Bakriyin, but he's one of the major don, like they say, one of the most kind of heroes of ancient Arabs. And so is this Zir Salim, is one of them as well. But Harith is meant to be this kind of huge legend who's older than Zir Salim, but he kind of keeps neutral and he doesn't pick a side. And in fact, this is where that famous statement comes, because remember when I mentioned that Kulayb kills the camel of Basoos. So Jassas initially had said, look, we don't want to war, we don't want to fight him, but what I'll do is I'll kill his camel, which is called Allal, which doesn't happen, and he ends up eventually just killing him, and it triggers this war. But when Harith ibn Ubad, this kind of other hero, this super mega kind of warrior of that tribe, is asked by Zir Salim, are you with us or are you against us? And his famous statement, which till today is used in Arabic, he says this war, la naqata li fiha wa la jamal. He said that the camel, like, I don't have a single camel in this war. Naqa is a female camel and Jamal is a male camel, because Basoos's camel was a Naqa that was killed, and Jassas was supposed to kill that Jamal, So he says, look, I don't have a camel in this matter. And he says, I'm just going to keep neutral. And he does up until eventually Zir Salim, because Zir Salim is on this rampage. And it goes on for 40 years. Bloodshed and nobody. And the amount of offers, and they ask Harith, this other warrior that I mentioned, to mediate. And he tries because he's this huge figure in ancient Arabia. And he says to him, look, take, and this is interesting because one of the things he says to him is, don't the Arabs say, he says the Arabs, وَقَالَتِ الْعَرَبْ النَّفْسُ بِالنَّفْسِ وَالْعَيْنُ بِالْعَيْنِ, that he says the Arabs have said that a soul for a soul. He says, look, we'll give you the person responsible. We'll give you one person. You can have him. What is this? Thousands have been killed. Orphans upon orphans have been left, and widows, and it's going on for years. Like, let's say this is 10 years into this battle, 10 whole years. Like, imagine going back 10 years in your own lifetime where you were, 10 years forward. Imagine 20 years back, 20, and you're only halfway. And when Harith ibn Ubad said to him that, look, haven't the Arabs said that a soul for a soul, we'll give you a person that's responsible. These are just innocent people. You're just killing. And he said, Lam taqul al-Arab hadha. He said, the Arabs never said this. Innama qalatha al-Yahud. He said, this is what the Jews have said. This ain't the law of the Arabs. Now, it's interesting, you see, because this war goes on for 40 years, and eventually everybody is aged, and people have died en masse, and people have, and everybody's tired. And right in the near the end, Harith ibn Ubad joins in as well, because his son Bujayd gets killed, and although he tries to keep calm, they insult him because he thinks that now that you've killed my son, you're going to call it quits. And when they tell him that he killed your son, they say Zir Salim just slit his throat. And he says, may Allah have mercy on my son, that he at least did sulah between these two tribes. He kind of brought them together. And they say, no. They say, do you know what he commented? He said, this is for bishisa in na'ali kulayb. He said, this is for the shoelace of Kulayb. Like basically, that's the part that you've wiped out, the shoelace. And this, as you can imagine, he lost the plot. At this point, Harith, who was an old man, but he was still a super warrior, he enters the fight as well. And it goes on, and people are massacred, and goes on for years. And eventually, even Jassas is killed right at the end. And this is an interesting plot twist that the Kulayb's son, his wife at the time was pregnant. She gives birth to a boy who grows up with the uncle Jassas, thinking that's his father. Only later on in life to realize this guy murdered my father. So he makes a plot with Zir Salim to assassinate his own father, Jassas, and thereby bringing, eventually, after 40 years, this war, it finally begins to simmer and quietens, and then just dies a death. And right at the very end, you see, and Zir Salim himself, he's known as Muhalhil as well. That's his kind of, he has a name, he goes by a title, and he then just goes off, and there's different stories. Some say he's just kind of sent off to some kind of remote place, and he has 2 slaves, and they execute him. They've had enough of him, so these 2 slaves decide to execute him. And they write this, and he says to them, he knows they're going to execute him. So he says, you know what? He says, okay, but you got to give this poem back. There's a poem. I want you to just say this. And it's a very simple line. He just says, Man mubligh al-hayyayni, he says, Man mubligh al-hayyayni anna muhalhilan lillahi darrukuma wa darru abikuma. So now this, it doesn't really make any sense. It just means, who will tell the people, the 2 tribes, about Muhalhil? May God praise you. And so they say, all right, fine, and they go back and they kill him, and they tell, this is Zir Salim, the one who went on this ruthless rampage for 40 years, and then they tell his family, oh, he died a natural death. We buried him. And they say he had a poem, and the poem was Man mubligh al-hayyaini anna muhalhilan lillahi darrukuma wa darru abikuma. And his niece, Kulayb's daughter, she's like one of these oracles in ancient Arabia. So she catches out and says that, aha, that's wrong. She says, do you know that's an incomplete poem? And she completes it. And she says that Man mubligh al-hayyaini anna muhalhilan, who will tell the people that muhalhil qatilun fil fala, no, adha qatilan fil falati munjadilan, that has ended or remains dead or has come to become dead, lying like laid out in the desert. Lillahi darrukuma wa darru abikuma, that was, may God bless you. La yabrah al-abdani hatta yuqtala, that don't let these two slaves go until they are executed. So she is this kind of oracle. Anyway, an interesting story, and those who are into Arabic. But my point was that you had this countless, relentless war going on, killing of people, and nobody would just stop because he would say no. Now, this was the backdrop, and these were the figures that create the landscape of Arabia, following after a few generations in which Islam arises. So at that time, it then instates that Jewish law, the Mosaic law, that, and in the Torah, Allah says that وَفِيهَا, we have written أَنَّ النَّفْسَ بِالنَّفْسِ, that a nafs is by a nafs, that a soul for a soul. And Allah says that the person who has been, if the person's been killed wrongly, then his family have certain rights, but they are not allowed to transgress. But all of a sudden, this starts to make so much more sense that like you understood it before anyway, but now it fits in to the greater landscape. So I got distracted sharing that story, but it's good, it's these things are known as Ayyam al-Arab, the history of the Arabs, and it's about the wars, but they are interesting because they give you a backdrop to what was going on and in the climate in which Islam then arises. Nora Parish, shukran, much love for the super chat. God bless you. Do you have a favorite English Quran translation? I don't. And it's been a considerable while that I haven't read an English translation. When I was doing my hifth of the Quran, I did read Abdullah Yusuf Ali's translation of the Quran. It was in classical English, but then he does have a commentary at the bottom. Since then, a lot of people, so many translations have been out, and this is me going back to the late 90s. I'm pretty sure didn't Aisha Bewley and her husband Abdul Haq Bewley also, I'm pretty sure they published a translation of the Quran as well, in a very a kind of very it has a fluency and flow, a natural fluency and flow to the translation, if I recall correctly. But there has been a lot. I'm sure, and you probably know a lot better translations than me, to be honest. All right. Somebody said, use the, Scorpio, Ahlan wa sahlan, use the Gracious Quran by Ahmad Hamad. Sure, that sounds good. The Study Quran, maybe. Yeah, sure. The Study Quran. I've heard some great things about that. All right. Right, yeah. And somebody said, look, the background I think is interesting. It helps to inform what comes later. It does. Because when somebody had asked earlier on about the biblical backdrop or finding, I don't know, connecting the Quran with the Bible in certain things, you see, this is what I'm talking about, because you then start to understand, if you study the history as well, oh, that makes sense now. Why did the Arabs do this? Ah, that's why they began it. Mufti, check out Shukran, much love for the super chat. Check out Shaukat Turawa's translation of a few surah. It's very good. Take rhyme into account, but he's not done the whole Quran. Okay, I will. Shaukat Turawa, please check that out as well, people. I see Saracen saying, I've missed the super chat. Let me go back. See, when I was going through the story, I wasn't... Mufti, do you believe the new cold between the NATO alliance and Russia and China, if such political climate comes to being, how will Muslims be affected? Will they be split and dragged into two sides? Yeah, it's an interesting question. Interesting question. I don't think the future is hard or hot wars, if we can call them that. I don't think that's the future. I think cold wars are the future until one just reigns supreme, as America did over Russia. And naturally, with such alliances, let's say Russia, China, against many of the other Western alliances, where do Muslim countries stand? I guess they would be divided. But you see, this is a world of economics. Okay. As the famous Urdu thing about pesa bolta hai, it's money speaks, people. That it's not, see, people don't care because they don't see them of any worth. It's only people who can contribute something significant that sit at that table. And this is why many Muslim countries have incredible talent. But there is a lot of corruption, and they need to overcome that. And inshallah, if they can produce some great, they can contribute to the history of human civilization. So, and because there's great people, great thinkers, great scientists, great physicists, great, you name it, people that have emerged from these third world countries, from Pakistan, from India, from some of the Arab countries. But they're just so, there's a lot going on. And it's true, it's not fair. They've been put there in that position because of the past. But right now, what's stopping them? This is the thing. Because you see, I'm not saying that I am saying that, yes, there's historical reasons for why this has happened, like colonialism. It is because of that it set things up in a certain way that they are disadvantaged. But if ever in life you are presented with the crossroad to choose your mentality, that of a victor or a victim, always choose the victor mentality. See, just crying about something isn't going to help it. It isn't going to fix it. I remember learning something years ago, since I learned it, I used it. It's probably been about 12, 13 years ago. I remember coming across this in a lesson. And it said that in life, that said when something happens, something unpleasant, untoward happens, there's only two things. Either you can do something about it or you can't. If you can do something about it, then stop crying and do something. And if you can't, then crying isn't it's only going to add to the crisis. So, and by crying, I mean whining and moaning and choosing the victim mentality. It is, you see, the battleground is in there. And people have to rise above. And I think in many ways, Muslims ought to be like, we have the philosophy, we have the belief, we have the faith to want to be a model for humanity. When you think about it, look, I think it was it Burma or one of the countries that said it was going to select its, I don't know if they lived through with it, but they said that they were going to, or maybe it wasn't Burma, but they said they were going to select their GDP to be the well-being, the happiness of the country. That how happy are our citizens? And think about that. That's such an amazing, beautifully explained point. That, look, it's, why should we judge our country by the kind of, by the income, the outcome, by the GDP, by, why should we judge it in monetary value? We want to judge it by happiness. Now, I know that, you see, now that's a message, it may not resonate in a global economic structure, but I commend it, because it's looking at humanity in a way that's about, you see, here in many of these countries, human rights are incredibly important, but the defining figure, the defining point is always economical. And it's about, well, everything's made quite politely cold. So it's about, right, being accountable and being this and the pound and this and what, and I understand there's reasons, and there's good reasons to do that, but it's not about trying to serve. And I think that's such an important thing, serving humanity. Right. Let me, Mufti, what would you do if you won the lottery? I don't know. That would be interesting. What would I do? I don't think I'd go totally mad, to be honest. I don't think I would. I've never been someone that's very money obsessed. I do believe in being entrepreneurial and making as much money as you possibly can, without compromising too much. I do believe in that, but I'm not so obsessed about things like that. I'm just, as a person, I'm not, and my friends who know me would know me like that. And I genuinely, like, even when I make investments and I do things, I just see things as, once I've invested, I think of it as gone. And then if it brings back some, if it reaps, then lillahi alhamd. But that's been my mentality. So I don't know. I'd hope I wouldn't lose the plot. Right. Okay. So, right. Okay. Well, what on earth was that? Okay. Was that the fan? I think I've got this. Nope. Right. I can't see it. Oh, that's okay anyway. Right. Let's move on, people. I did want to cover, I don't even know. Whoa. All right. Let's cover a brief lesson, which is quite important. Oh, this is, I'll have this clip out by the end of the week on Surah Zilzal and the unconscious mind. Right. People, think of this verse. Right now. In Surah Al-Jum'ah, this is a verse, an amazing verse that we all know. Right. ذَاكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ ذُو الْفَضْلِ الْعَظِيمِ. That is the grace of God, the favors of God. He gives them to whom he wills. It's an amazing verse. Incredibly positive. Now, And we ask Allah to really shower upon us all His countless blessings and to make us be appreciative of them. But you see, I want to show a different permutation. Let's take a look at these verses, and then I'm going to go to Walid ibn al-Mughirah as a brief case study. This is from Surah Al-Mudaththir, okay, from verse 11. ذَرْنِي وَمَنْ خَلَقْتُ وَحِيدًا. Now, this doesn't have to be solely about Walid, but many people feel that these verses they reflect him as the primary subject of discussion, but just as an example, using him as an example for others. So, okay. ذَرْنِي وَمَنْ خَلَقْتُ وَحِيدًا وَجَعَلْتُ لَهُ مَالًا مَمْدُودًا. And you can see Allah saying that let these people be, let such a person be who I created, and I showered him with countless gifts and monies, or money and wealth, and wabanina shahuda, and offspring, and especially in that society where people boasted of tribal kind of warriorship, and he had at least three incredibly prominent sons who were many amongst them Khalid bin Walid, the great warrior of Arabia, who later on, after Fath Makkah, embraces Islam and comes to have the title Sayfullah al-Maslul, the drawn sword of God. But he was the son. So you can see this is the father. وَمَهَدْتُ لَهُ تَمْهِيدًا, and things had been made easy for him in life. ثُمَّ يَطْمَعُ أَنْ أَزِيدَ, yet he desires, he craves more. كَلَّا إِنَّهُ كَانَ لِآيَاتِنَا عَنِيدًا. This condemnation of his stubborn hubris that he has, this stubbornness, that devastation, that this person has ruined everything he's basically done. إِنَّهُ فَكَّرْ وَقَدَّرْ, that he actually delved on this. He actually thought about this so hard. Like, he wasn't somebody that just didn't pay attention. He did pay attention. That's the problem. فَكَّرَ وَقَدَّرْ, and then he kind of planned around it. فَقُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرْ. Damn him. What a plan that he came out with. ثُمَّ قُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرْ. ثُمَّ نَظَرْ, he used reason. ثُمَّ عَبَسَ وَبَصَرْ, and was disappointed. ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ وَاسْتَكْبَرْ, turned away and considered himself to be something mighty. Considered istikbar. It comes from the word kabir, which is big, like Allahu Akbar. Now, istikbar is to seek something to be big on the 10th form in the Arabic wazn, in the Arabic form. So istif'al. So to seek something, istikbar, to seek. And he thought, and look, and what does he say? That he says, فَقَالَ إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا سِحْرٌ يُؤْثَرٌ. He said, this is but just magic that is being conveyed, a tradition. إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا قَوْلُ الْبَشَرِ. This is but the word of man. سَأَصْلِهِ سَقَرْ. That, this, it's just ruin and damnation for this person. And you can see, right, I thought to myself, hubris. This is what I want to discuss. And especially if you take a look at the definition, because it is about excessive pride or self-confidence, but from the Greek tragedy, pride or defiance of the gods, leading to nemesis. Now, why? Those of you that don't know, Walid ibn Mughirah, somebody who was much older than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was one of the Sayyids of Quraish, right? One of the leaders of Quraish. He was from Bani al-Makhzum, and I think he meets the lineage of the Prophet with Murrah, They meet at the ancestor Murrah. But he's from Quraish, and he was incredibly known as, in his day and age, clearly a millionaire. He had a lot of wealth ranging from in the Hijaz to the Tihama. In all these, he had a lot of fields. He was invested commercially in a lot of assets, in trade, incredibly successful. But that's not the point. Because you might say, well, Mufti, so what? And it's true, so what? He was an incredibly righteous man. See, this is where it gets interesting. He was somebody that was symbolic of a good cause. He was known in Jahiliyyah. You know how the Prophet ﷺ was titled in Jahiliyyah as-Sadiq al-Amin, the trustworthy, the truthful. When he was a young man, years before prophethood, he was titled this. Like people, this is how they saw the Prophet ﷺ, as-Sadiq al-Amin. Walid ibn al-Mughirah, guess what his title was? People actually saw him as this. Al-Adl. Justice. Not even that he himself was the embodiment of justice. He endeavored to assist people where he could. Quraish was struggling after there was flood damage to the Kaaba. He said, I will solely take up the entire cost what I can to rebuild the Kaaba. He did. He was a devout individual. And he was somebody who, more than just being devout, was committed to the concern of people. And he, on several occasions, he would buy the kisad, the cloth of the Kaaba, he would buy that. If he found people were in, let's say, some kind of desperation, he would assist them. And he was somebody that Quraysh looked at as, that man is not only wise, he is just, he's grounded. He's got money, he hasn't driven him crazy. He's got wealth, he's got status, and he actually gives forward to humanity. What a guy. It's true though. Giving is living, and this is what this man symbolized. So what went wrong? You see, this can be one of the greatest traps of circumstances. Sometimes in life, the problem is, in many ways, we are the good guys. We are, let's say, by our perspective, worthy. You will see and this happens with religious figures, it will happen with clerics, it will happen with people that have been given any kind of, there is a worthiness, and in many cases they are doing things. I mean, sometimes they're just rinsing other people's, they're just on the back of others, but on many occasions, these people are actually doing that. And then comes prophethood, but not to you. It hurts. See, this is the ego. You got to understand that what he says, the verse of the Quran, that لولا نزل هذا القرآن على رجل من القريتين عظيم. Could it not have been revealed on a man who is great from these regions? And he himself said he never had an issue with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. People didn't have an issue with the Prophet. He felt people felt the Prophet was a trustworthy person. They may not agree with his mission, but they didn't have a characteristic issue with him. He felt in many ways, do I not deserve? I have given a lifetime in the servitude to man. Do I not deserve something? Or either there's nothing. You see, this is it. Because sometimes if there's nothing, we can still get by. The problem is coming second place. Not that he's second in prophethood, but this is the problem. You see, in a psychological study, people were asked, in a psychological study, people who were fired from a job, to realize that that's because the factory or the place had substituted them with machines. Let's say certain conveyor belts and all these kind of, they've had the whole process automated, were less hurt than somebody who was fired to learn that another person had been given his job. People were substantially more hurt to realize that actually another person took that. But the other people in a similar situation, if they learned that, oh, it became automated and a machine is doing that job, were less hurt, you see, because nothing isn't as hurtful as something sometimes. So it really hurt him that how can this be that I have done all of these things? I'm al-adl. I'm justice, the embodiment. Have I not spent decades helping people financially, giving in charity, rebuilding the Kaaba, clothing it? They used to, the Kisa of the Kaaba on several occasions. Allah. Defiance of the gods in Greek tragedy. See, excessive pride, this self-confidence that I'm so worthy, this istihqaqiyya in Arabic. And this is the thing that you see, it goes back to Allah saying that is ذَاكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُعْطِيهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. It is the grace of God, he gives it to whom he wills. So there's so many lessons to learn that when Walid ibn al-Mughirah turned against the Prophet, he didn't do it because when he says, they ask him, can you comment on the Quran? And he comments on it. He comments on the Quran. He says that he listens to it. And he says it's, when speaking about it, he says that, let me see if I've got it here. Oh, no. Or may not have it here. Right, so he actually says, when he reads the Quran, he says that, oh, inna lahu la talawa. And he says it has a unique style and a halawa and a sweetness. وَإِنَّهُ لَيَعْلُو وَلَا يُعْلَى. It's something that is supreme and nothing can reign supreme over it. And he says all these things until Quraish feel he's converted to Islam. Because they ask him, is the Prophet a madman? And he's he's just. He's just. So he says, the Prophet isn't a madman, because he knows that if I say he's mad, I'm just being a hater. And the Prophet isn't mad, so why should I call him mad? So they say, is the Prophet a kahin or an arraf, one of these people that kind of like into their clay, like a clay, like one of these fortune tellers? Is he one of them? And he says no. He says he's not, because he knows, you see, he is this just person that I ain't gonna lie. So this And he says, and the Quran is magnificent. So people think he's going to embrace Islam, but it hurts him. That why is it not to me? Because am I not more deserving than he calls the Prophet Ibn Abi Kabsha? The non-Muslim Quraish people would call him that. It's just a name, like they had this name for him. It's not in itself derogatory, but it just means the son of this person. But they would refer to him as that. And he says that, am I not more deserving than him? So people think he's going to embrace Islam, and he refuses. And the Quran mentions, look, fakkara wa qaddar. He fakkar, thumma nazar. He used reason. He thought about it. He put his mind to it. He got obsessed with it. And then when they asked him, so what is it then if you don't believe in it? He said, it's magic. But he didn't mean by magic in the sense that the Prophet was bringing up things from thin air. Because when they said to him, magic, he said, sihrun yu'thar. He said, don't you see that it splits a man from his wife? And what he meant was, because if you looked at it, people who were embracing the faith were separating from the family. So in his own way, he keeps this position of, oh, I'm still just. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to be a hater, even though he is hating, but I'm not going to be publicly a liar. I'm going to say things that still have a kind of reality to them. But I'm going to say, well, that's a magic that you're splitting them with, you see. So, but it is this hubris, this pride. And it is true, because it's really a lesson for all of us that we, at times, it can happen to the best of people, that they can feel that they are deserving. And you'd never expect it in the path of somebody who is doing good. But yet many a religious folk, many a spiritual folks, many a humanitarian have kind of gone astray by hubris. May Allah protect us all, keep us all grounded and humble, because it is something I want to share that with you guys, because it is quite profound. A lot of people speak about Walid ibn Mughirah, but they don't mention this, or I've not heard the way this connect. They just mention he was this great rich leader of Quraish, and he was a nemesis of the Prophet, and he was against the Prophet. But it just adds so much more flavor that you start to realize, wow, it comes alive in front of you. So, okay, moving on, people. Gold Globe, shukran, much love for the super chat, dearly appreciated. I was just trying to see let me just bring this up. Where are we? Okay, I was just trying to see how much how much time has gone by as well. All right. Okay, there is a super chat I just missed. All right. Hira Rodriguez excessive amount of facial hair for a female, surgery to remove. Yeah, so this is an issue that, as you can imagine, like every issue in Islam, the scholars have disagreed. But you will find that the Malikiya and the Hanafiya from the schools of law were very clear in women can remove all this facial hair and things like excessive hair, and they can make their eyebrows, they can do these kind of things. It doesn't, especially the Malikiya were very clear. So they say, so you'll find both in the Sharh al-Kabir and Saghir, I believe, as well. So you'll find the Suqi and Dardir, I believe, both discussing that when the hadith about the woman, the Prophet cursing these people was not to do with this, and it was to do with, they say, women who were in a state of iddah, a period of mourning following the death of a husband, and it was just to condemn that because it was causing social issues. And the Hanafiya in Kitab al-Athar bring a narration from Aisha radiallahu anha about imata, about removing hair from the face. So these two schools are definitely very on the lenient side, and you'll find Abul Walid al-Baji as well from the Malikiyah once again will use references, and other scholars will as well, that when there was a companion whose nose was cut off during some battle, or he was in somebody struck him with a sword and they had cut off his nose. Now, in the time of the Prophet, so he would wear a golden nose. I've always wondered, I wonder how he would make it stick. I mean, maybe they had something that tied it around, or I don't know. But he would wear a golden nose. And obviously gold, because it's malleable and you could design it, and it won't kind of erode and corrosion and stuff like this. But you see, the golden nose would serve no purpose at all. It's only aesthetic. So the Prophet never condemned him, never criticized him for that. And it's rulings like this that Abul Walid al-Baji then expand on, seeing that this is purely aesthetic values, and that if a person, it can add value to their life in terms of their confidence and things like this, then this is what these schools say. And many today of the ulama from Egypt as well, and other countries, the Dar al-Ifta al-Misriya and ulama al-Azhar, and many of these ulama will all concur with that ruling. And also, a point worth noting, which many people ignore, the hadith they use to say that, but the Prophet cursed these women, that those who trim the eyebrows, namisat, mutanammisat, and those who with the teeth, and those who extend the hair, and those who do tattoos, and even on tattoos, the Malikiyah, you'll have people discussing it. You'll have amongst them Az-Zannati, who will speak about the Malikis giving, according to some Malikis, it not being haram. They will say it wasn't haram, and Qarafi also arguing in line of that as well, and stating that the Berber women have always used tattoos. Now, and they said that this was either to do with women in their iddah, in that period of mourning, or it was to do with those who did it with an intent to mutate. Now, what's interesting is those people who do take this hadith literally and very harshly to the letter, saying that women who trim the eyebrow, and that's their worldview. If they want to take that, that's absolutely fine. It's their perspective, their faith. We can't impose things on one another. These, if you believe in something, that's your belief. You don't need to do it. But you can't go around imposing on somebody else, why don't you do it? Well, they might follow the Maliki madhab, they might follow the Hanafi madhab, they might follow the ulama of al-Azhar, they might follow. See, it's your faith and ahkam are only to you. Or you may advise, if people ask, you say, well, I heard this from a teacher, it's up to you. But you can't impose on others. That's absolutely out of order. You're not trained to do that. I mean, you're not allowed to impose anyway, but you're not even really allowed to teach it unless you're trained. You can only just say, oh, I heard such and such. Now, something that people, an important thing that people often miss is the hadith mentions about those women who straighten the teeth. And they file it and straighten it. But today, then braces would cover that ruling, because braces, for the most part, just have an aesthetic value, and they're often straightening the teeth with them. That's all you're doing. And sometimes they have to file down some of the teeth. Yet, you see, because braces are ubiquitous, most ulama, I'm not aware, maybe they declare that haram as well then, because that's what the hadith says about the women that file the teeth. And the reason they would file them is, if you're going to say it's for aesthetics, then that's exactly what most braces do today. Most people, their teeth are just fine, as in from a functionality perspective. It's just they don't look good. So they need to, and you do get exceptions where people, it's troublesome for them, but in most cases it's just aesthetic value. And I'm not aware of ulama really being harsh against braces. So that's food for thought. Right. Hira Rodriguez. Shukran for the super chat. I gotta check the time. So right, should I leave that? I tell you what, I'll take very briefly, and I'll leave it for another day. But the difference between bashar and insan, according to some people, there's no difference. Both terms are used in the Quran. According to some people, there is a difference. So people like Abdul Sabur Shaheen and many others will argue that bashar is it's the generic, so it's the genus in that sense. So they will argue that bashar are all hominins and insan is homo sapien. So, and they use verses from the Quran where Allah says, Inni khaliqun basharan min teen, that I'm creating a basharan, which makes it nakira, it means a bashar. So the fact that you're saying a bashar shows, like if I said, according to that understanding, it's saying a type, naw'un min al bashar. Okay, so but other people may not agree with that. That's fine. That's ubiquitous. Oh, right. So something that's very widespread. It's everywhere. Mufti, you heard Ibn Maryam by Mirza Ghalib? No, I haven't actually. Do send that to me. I'm a huge fan of Ghalib. Super chat below it. Mufti, did you check out Robert Safia? I didn't. I will do. Shukran for reminding me. Much love. Did I miss any other super chats? Oh, right. Imagination Scene. Mufti, last recommendation is the late Professor Massimo Campanini. He gave a good lecture on force in Islam, also wrote about Averroes and Hegel. Can you send me that, please? Send it to me. I'm going to check this out, but just in case I forget, I'd appreciate it if you can send it to me. Yeah, I don't know if no, I can't. I was checking if I could. No, it doesn't let us. Let me see, actually. No, I was thinking if it could. If you can send that to me, if you are on, just thinking, if you are on Instagram, but if you're not on Instagram, if you can email me or, just get my, you'll get my email. I'm sure you will. Right, cool. Let's move on, people. Can we have a hug if we see you in person? Gio. Much love to all of you. Yeah, of course. I absolutely cherish you all. I genuinely, I know last week I was speaking about communities, and I was saying that we've shifted now to an online community, and this in many ways is that community. This is a community that I'm a part of and you guys are a part of. We have a community. It's, it may not be connected spatially, but through a virtual space and through these kind of hyperspaces, we've got and the souls, al-arwah junudun mujannada, as the hadith in Bukhari says. So the souls are intertwined, people. They are connected. And Mufti, being a year listening to you, I like to extend my thanks. I think you're the only Muslim globally that has provided this unique platform. Shukran, yaar. Rula dega, yaar. You're going to make me cry. Oh, much love. I dearly appreciate it. I will email Shukran. I appreciate that. I saw a video of challenging you to a jinn possession debate. Will you take it up? okay, but later on towards the year, right now I want to focus on a bit of this kind of work. I'm trying to get out some meaningful content for people, help people kind of with their faith, and maybe give it later on in this year. We did have a very good exchange on Bukhari Gate. I just want to focus on this. I've never had an issue in debating people, and in fact, dare I say, I think I have a knack for it, and I think it comes very natural to me. And you see, but the nature of debates, and is, if I'm to be honest, they bring out a side in you that is quite even if at the face of it you're not, but the undercurrent is cutthroat, because it brings that out of, even if the viewer can't see it, but I know what it does to me as a person. It brings a side of me that, because it's competition, you see, whether we like it or not. The nature of debates is competition. I'm just being honest. People may say, oh, it's to establish the truth and all these things, and that's nice sounds, and I hope it is for the, and I'm not saying it's really to establish your own truth. And it becomes, even if it's friendly, but in the moment it gets competitive. So I don't mean by that you walk away hating the person. You won't. Like, I've had a very good debate discussion with Sheikh Abdul Majid earlier on this year, and it was very I have much respect for him, much love for him. I did not walk away from that hating him. I walked away from that loving him. But I won't lie, in the debate, in that moment when it's going on, it brings aside, it brings back to life a persona within me that it is ruthless in trying to kind of get your point across. And sometimes I don't like that. I know it all too well. It's me, and I don't shy away, because I know, and I mean, I could say it in a way and it would come across arrogant, but I know my own capacity at dialogical debates, but it brings out a side of you that you think, I want to focus on trying to help people a bit more, bring that side out more, because these are all within us, ain't they? And I'm just being very honest and transparent. People probably won't be honest about these things, or maybe they would. I'm just laying it out. What is it? Ab jiske ji mein aaye isse le roshni, हमने तो दिल जलाकर सरेआम रख दिया. So the poet says, whosoever wants, then let him take flame or take light from this. I've set my heart on fire and put it in front of you all. Yeah. So, shukran for the super chat. Much love. Hasp, you're doing it. If you drink alcohol in this life, the alcohol of heaven is forbidden for you. No, I don't think that's necessarily, I don't think it works like that. I wouldn't worry like that. I would just focus on, you see, this was another thing I forgot to mention when I spoke of Walid ibn Mughirah. He was somebody that had made alcohol haram on himself in the past. And that's interesting. You can judge by that his moral standards. So, yeah. But it doesn't mean that if a person drank alcohol and then they are deprived of it. You see, these things have harms to them, and they can, you see, they're very volatile. The nature of alcohol is it's volatile. With many people, it may not make them flip, but it could. You see, it's just volatile. That's the thing. Speaking of community, I would love to see even more people on Mufti's Patreon and Discord, just throwing it out there. Much love, Nora. You're doing it. Shukran. Yep, people. Patreon is there if you're interested. It's getting more and more active in my sessions with people. So that is there if you want to be a part of the Discord group called Mindscape. And so there's people having discussions, sharing things, and Q&A and other things as well. True Guidance, just sending just his love. Look, shukran, much love, much love. Right. Ruman, I do listen, but I never get to join the live stream. Much love. Thoughts on Danny Boy's debate? I haven't watched it. I'm being honest. I haven't watched it. Is it worth watching? Let me know your thoughts and I'll consider it. You see. She sent it with stars on Facebook. I can't see the question. Can you post the question here? You said that somebody sent a question, but I can't seem to see. I think what's happened is today, this streaming software has been playing up with Facebook. So I think the Facebook comments are coming through, but maybe some ain't. So I'm just trying to check. I can't see the question. So Claire, if you could post it, I'll look out for it. All right. Yep. Okay. Any thoughts on somebody saying about the debate between Danny Boy and Haris Sultan? I haven't watched it. I'm not sure if is it worth watching? Let me know. And same old, it's a waste of time, somebody's saying. Yeah, I'm not that intrigued. It's that same thing. I would press for a debate myself. But right now I'm trying to focus on more positive things. But then people don't really want to debate me either, which is understandable. If I was them, I wouldn't want to debate me, to be honest. Let's come to here. I did have something I thought. People. Allah. Let me tell you something, an incident between two legends. Ibn Rushd on one hand, Abul Walid ibn Rushd, the great Muslim philosopher, jurist, the judge of his time, the philosopher of his era, the man who they call the commentator when it comes to Aristotle. He brought back to life, he resuscitated the philosophical works of Aristotle and became the conduit that served them onto Europe, aiding it from its dark ages to its renaissance. Ibn Rushd, the man who stood face to face, metaphorically speaking, against Imam Ghazali when Imam Ghazali had unleashed an attack on philosophy. And you have to remember, philosophy in that day and age included science as well. So science is the study of nature and our world and observations. And so this, in that day and age, hikmah was that. Hikmah was the study of nature, the study of plants, botany, the study of the cosmos, the study of the self. Especially these kind of things put together, they did refer to them as hikmah, and obviously also philosophy as well. But as sciences continue to mature through time, they tend to kind of branch off and become specialist areas. So in his day and age, he responded to Ghazali's Tahafut al-Falasifa with his Tahafut al-Tahafut. So Tahafut al-Falasifa was the incoherence of the philosophers, and he replied with his Tahafut al-Tahafut, the incoherence of the incoherent. Amazing. A legend, somebody who, if you read his work on, in fact, I have a video clip on Averroes. If you check it out on YouTube, I read through his his commentary on Plato's Republic, where he speaks about Andalus in his day and age. And this is, we're going back almost 900 years. Yeah. Where he speaks about it's a shame that women, he says, are 50% of our society, yet people don't, they don't create opportunities for them to prosper in this and this and this. If you read those extracts, you would think that's a contemporary writer. And yet it was written almost 900 years ago in Muslim Spain. So this is the man, the myth, the legend, Ibn Rushd, the voice of reason, Allah. And in his day and age, you also had, much junior to him, Muhyiddin, Ibn Arabi, Al-Kibrit Al-Ahmar, or Sheikh Al-Akbar. You had the man, the legend of mystical experience, the man who had tread the path of consciousness. And it's amazing what they call al-kashf, that kind of like removing the veil of the dimensions. And this, so you have these two huge monumental figures and they meet. So what's interesting is Ibn Rushd for long had, you see, because he championed the voice of reason, he was against many of the Sufis, and he was against many of the theologians, and against because he felt that they were inaccurate in some of their things, but he was never against the path of consciousness. And even if it wasn't one that he maybe championed, and this mystical experience. So when he meets Ibn Arabi, he's the judge, Ibn Rushd is, and he's wanted to meet Ibn Arabi. He's heard about him. He says that there's this young man who has had these great mystical experiences, and he has treaded this path of consciousness and with just great discoveries. So Ibn Rushd was so intrigued, and he wanted to meet him for a considerable amount of time. So he knew Ibn Arabi's father. Ibn Arabi's father was almost like a student to Ibn Rushd. And so he told him, you have to send your son to me. I need to meet him. And this had gone on for a while. So on this one occasion, his father, Ibn Arabi, sends Ibn Arabi to him. So Ibn Arabi approaches, and these two legends meet. And when he meets him, you see, it's as though the conversation had already taken place. And remember what I said about the souls are entwined, they are connected. When Ibn Rushd met him, he asked him straight away. He just said to him, he just looked at him and said, is it or no? And you think, what? What is? He just looked at him as yes or no. And Ibn Arabi looked straight at him and he says yes. And Ibn Rushd lights up. He lights up. Allah. This, you can see the radiance, the glow. And then Ibn Arabi says, La, no. And Ibn Rushd, he becomes tense. You see this kind of going into a remote, pensive distraction almost. And then Ibn Arabi follows it by saying, وَبَيْنَهُمَا تَطِيحُ الْأَرْوَاحِ. He said, and between them, the souls are annihilated. Allah, Allah, Allah. Na'am, that na'am, la, wa baynahuma tatirul arwah. That yes, no, and between them, the souls are annihilated. What on earth? And you see, it is this conversation, and this is it. And then he goes. And Ibn Rushd says to him, he says, do come back. And before he actually goes, Ibn Rushd says to him, see, because when he says the souls are annihilated, it once again restores hope, and I'll explain why in just a moment. And then Ibn Rushd says, هذه حالة أثبتناها. He says, this condition, this state, we have affirmed it. وَمَا رَأَيْنَا لَهَا أَرْبَابًا. It's just we hadn't seen a people who had qualified it yet. And he says, فَالْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي أَنَا فِي زَمَانٍ فِيهِ وَاحِدٍ مِنْ أَرْبَابِهَا. He says, all praise be to Allah that I'm in an era where one of its people, a person of that path, is in it. But not just any person, arbab, that from the legends, the al-fatihin, those who open maghaliq abwabiha, who open the locks of the doors of this path. Walhamdulillahi alladhi haddani bi ru'yati, khassani bi ru'yati. And all praise be to Allah who allowed me to see such a person. And he tells him that do come back. And it's said that Ibn Arabi goes, he's a very young man at the time, maybe in his very late teens, possibly maybe approaching 20 or in his late teens at the at the most. He's not he's very young, whereas Ibn Rushd is very senior at that time. And Ibn Arabi says, I was meant to meet him. I had made another appointment to meet him. And he says, I had a dream. And he says, in the dream, I was there and Ibn Rushd was there, the Don. And Ibn Rushd is one of the great Maliki legends, by the way. He says he was there. And he says, and between us, all of a sudden, was a very faint, it was slightly opaque veil, very thin, but a veil. He says, I could see him, but for some reason, he couldn't see me anymore. And then he awoke. And he says that I felt that this dream was a sign that maybe Ibn Rushd will not see eye to eye on this matter about this path of consciousness. So maybe it's better not to get into that altercation with him. So he says, even though I had a meeting, an appointment to see him, I avoided it. And he says, and then I was only reunited with him when his body was brought to Marrakesh to be buried. And it's just a mind-blowing encounter of two legendary symbols of two paths. This path of pure rational experience and pure conscious experience, and how these paths are then entwined. And Ibn Rushd saying, even though he was harsh against some of the other people, he said that this is a state that we have affirmed, that he said that I knew it. I just hadn't met the right people. And in his people have really tried to, what was it that he meant with his answer, Ibn Arabi? So look at this. So the backdrop to what he was saying, and people may disagree over it, was Ibn Rushd had in his mind the question about reason. Can reason, the path of reason, what you have experienced, does it affirm that? Like, are we may be taking different routes, but is it, we're both, it's right, isn't it? Does it, like your kashf, the veil being removed, does it not just affirm this path of pure reason? This was the question in the mind of Ibn Rushd. And when he met Ibn Arabi replied, "Na'am, yes it is." And Ibn Rushd became so elated, ecstatic with joy, because this was a man who'd spent his life fighting the corner of the voice of reason. And then Ibn Arabi said, "La." And it took him to a somber, depressive almost state, that no. But then he followed it with this caveat that وَبَيْنَهُمَا تَطِيرُ الْأَرْوَاحِ, and between them the souls must encounter an ego death. Allah, Allah, Allah. Now, you can take from that what you may. But one thing I understand is that in the search of divine truth, there is something known as ego death, the annihilation of the ego, al-fana fillah, this concept of annihilating the self, fillah. And it is weird. It is not against the voice of reason, but yet it is a path that is very experiential. And that's why his la, the na'am being yes, it is not against the voice of reason. It only affirms reason. But the no being that, but it is something that it must be tasted. I can't tell you what an apple tastes like. I can just say it's sweet or it's bitter or sour, or I can try to give some likeness, but you see, it's experiential. But to experience it, the ego must taste to death. People, let's wrap it up for today with that. It's been amazing. It's been incredible. I did want to send out the link and bring some of you on live, but there's a dear friend who's traveling in the morning, and so I've got to still try and say my salams there. So guys, it's been awesome. Much love to you all. If you haven't already liked, subscribed, spread the love, people. Do the love, man. Do the love. Don't do the hate. So spread the love, like the channel, share it, click the notification icon, Instagram, there you go, like, Facebook, Patreon, if you want to take it up a notch and you want the the one-to-one, man, the perspective management, the one-to-one sessions, consultations, you can come to Patreon and choose from the tiers, and you can join also the Discord, which is the Mindscape Discord. So that's my own Discord server. People, it's been an absolute pleasure. Right, I'll leave you with that. Take very good care of yourselves. Spread love, man. Wassalamullahi alaikum wa khuda hafiz.